Okay, so I have tried to record this like 5,000 times, and I always end up turning it off and starting over because I just kind of felt like it had to be perfect, because it's like it's my brand story. It's telling you why you should watch my channel, who I am, and why you would care. So in my mind, I was just making it this really big thing, and I'm like, everything has to be perfect. Like, I can't stumble and mutter and stutter, and it just has to be perfect because in my mind, I'm like, I'm starting this YouTube channel, and I want to be like, I want it to be perfect. And honestly, it's just kind of like not who I am. I mean, I'm not like the perfectly organized person and, that just sits down and does everything right the very first time and never makes mistakes. And I'm sure that a lot of you can, or hopefully a lot of you can relate, So I'm just going to quit trying to make it perfect, and I'm just going to talk to you like as if you were my friend and we're having coffee, and I already knocked the mic over. That's a good start. We're just friends. We're having well, I don't drink coffee, but having a Dr. Pepper while you have your coffee at the coffee shop, and I'm just like telling you about who I am because I just feel like knowing the backstory behind somebody personally always makes me want to learn more about them, and it makes me kind of relate to them better. And so, I'll want to watch their channel more if I kind of like know where they came from. So that is the goal. That's the goal for today. So I'm going to try my best to record my brand story. So, in order for this video not to be, a million years long, I am going to break it up into 3 parts. So I'm going to tell you, well, first of all, I guess really my intro, I'm going to tell you like who I am and why you care. But I'm going to tell you where I was before I started my photography journey, and the big catalyst, the big change, what just kind of, set me on my path, and then where I am now. Because if I put all of those things into one video, nobody's going to watch it because this video will be like 3 hours long. No, not 3 hours long, but it will be long. So for this part 1 of my brand story, I'm telling you my backstory. So let me begin by telling you who I am. Why do you care? My name is Tia, and I am an editorial portrait photographer. I have been shooting portraits and building my business over the last decade. Picked up my first camera in 2013, and then here I am now in 2024 telling you guys my story. So it has been quite the journey. And why am I creating this channel? Why do you care? Why am I here? Why are you watching me? I really, really love teaching other photographers how to chase their dreams the way I did. So that is what I want to share with you guys. So I move my hands a lot. Just get used to that in the video. I cannot be that perfect talking head where I'm just like, here I am and everything's perfect, and I'm just going to tell you exactly how I did everything in my cute little, robot voice. No, that is not me. I move around a lot when I get nervous, and I am still getting used to recording myself. So if you hang around with me on this channel, I promise you the videos will get better and better as we go. So it's all a learning process, but I have been putting this channel off for years, and I just needed to bite the bullet and do it because honestly, the reason I wanted to create it is I love education for photographers, and I feel like it's kind of hard to find real nitty-gritty education out there. And I also love fashion and DIY and how to incorporate that into my photography. That's kind of what built my photography business and made it what it is today. And there's not a lot of that out there on YouTube. Like when you go in and you like search on YouTube for, fashion DIY for photography, for photo shoots, fashion for photo shoots, and DIY fashion for photography. Like there's nothing there. There's hardly anything out there. So I feel like it's always one or the other. It's photography education or it's fashion DIY. I want to bridge those two together. I want to, bridge that gap. I want to merge those two things into this one channel with you because it's what I love. It's what built my business and made it successful, and I want to share it with all of you guys because I am not a gatekeeper, first and foremost. If you're going to be here, you're going to be hanging around on my channel, you'll learn that pretty quickly. I hate gatekeepers. When I first started photography 10 years ago, YouTube wasn't even really popular back then, and just social media in general was not super popular back then, and there was nobody like teaching, like nobody giving educational information about photography. So it was kind of like you just had to learn everything yourself, trial and error, and everybody was a gatekeeper. They always wanted to keep their secrets to themselves, and it just drove me crazy because obviously it takes longer to learn if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have anybody to kind of help guide you along and teach you things. So I just kind of taught myself. My best friend and I, have been shooting for a long time. She's actually the one that got me into photography, and I'm so glad that she did because I wouldn't be where I am today. But I digress. I want to start at the beginning. So my backstory, now that you know who I am, and I'm in Oklahoma City, by the way. I don't know where, you guys are watching from, hopefully from all over by the time this channel gets some traction. But I am a photographer here in Oklahoma City, right in, mid-America. And you would think that there might not be a market for editorial photography here. I don't live in New York. I don't live in LA, but there is. It's all about the style and what you do with it. So now I'm rambling. I'm going to stop. Let's get back into the backstory. I have lived in Oklahoma all my life. I was born and raised here, and I grew up super duper poor. Poor. And I knew that I wanted to break that cycle. I wanted to, do something different. I wanted to kind of get away from that and set myself up for success in life. I didn't want to struggle my whole life, and I wanted to just give my kids a better life than what I had when I eventually would have them. So I just knew from a very early age that I, wanted to break the cycle. And so I went to college. I got a degree in marketing and advertising, which back then in Oklahoma, it wasn't the smartest choice because there wasn't a lot here in terms of jobs for advertising and marketing. You could basically just get into sales. And so that's what I did. I got my first job out of college. I think I was 25 maybe. But I got my first sales job out of college, and I absolutely hated it. I hated it so much. I am not a salesperson, which is why partially it probably took me so long to do this YouTube channel, because I hate feeling like I'm selling things to people. So I got my first sales job. I was working at Office Max selling business accounts, to companies. I was just cold calling companies all day long, asking if they wanted to open an Office Max account. And it was awful. It was dreadful. I hated it. I hated going to work every day. I literally would just wake up every day and wish that that wasn't my life or my job. So I worked there for 6 months, because I'm not a quitter. I stuck with it. I gave it a shot. I, thought it might get better, or I might get better at it. And after 6 months, I got really, really lucky, and I had a friend that was able to get me an interview at Chesapeake, which was an oil and gas company. If you're from Oklahoma, I'm sure Chesapeake was a big name back then, about a decade ago. And so I was lucky enough to get on at Chesapeake. And so that was my first job in oil and gas, and I stayed there for several years. Oil and gas was not my dream job. I didn't wake up when I was 10 saying I really want to be in oil and gas. That is not what happened. But it was a job, and it was stability. And for me, that was incredibly important, so important. I just wanted to have a steady job that made a steady income that I could, save up with and, use my checks to, start building a better life for myself. And so I got the job. I was married at the time. I was in a very toxic relationship. It was not a great marriage. And I was just doing this 9-to-5 job in oil and gas, and I knew that it wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't, my dream job, but I was working and I was making good money and I was putting so much back in savings, and I was just going to this job every day. I was pretty good at it. I did well. My bosses loved me. But I just knew that it wasn't like what was going to fulfill me. Like I knew that I couldn't be there forever, just because I wasn't happy. I'm very creative. I used to want to be a fashion designer. And an artist and a singer and all of that jazz. So my brain is very much on the artistic side. And although I am good with numbers and math and English and all that stuff, it's definitely not my passion. So I kept working there just because it was safe. And my whole life I'd grown up poor. And so I'm just like, I don't want to quit my job. I don't want to let this go because it's really good money and it's really stable at the time. Oil and gas has definitely had some ups and downs over the years, but at the time it was really safe. And I wasn't like super happy at home, but I was decently happy at my job. I knew what I was doing. I felt comfortable doing it. And I had that paycheck coming every 2 weeks, and it was good. I felt good. I felt like everything was okay. Then all of a sudden, right after I got married, we had to move to Texas, and I had to quit my oil and gas job that, although was not fulfilling, it was also like very steady and made me feel very proud that I had, this good paying job after growing up as poor as I did. So I did not want to leave my job. And I unfortunately did not have a choice. We had to move. It was a military move. And so I moved to Texas. I was living in Denton, and I was in this toxic marriage that I did not want to be in. And when we moved down there, everything just got worse. Like I was never fulfilled at my job, but then having to leave that job and move to a new state and be all by myself, away from my family, away from my friends, it felt awful. It felt like I had just been ripped away from everything that I knew. And so anyway, I was down there and I was trying to find a job in oil and gas. And at that time, there had been a lot of layoffs. So there just weren't a lot of job prospects for oil and gas. But I needed, a job. I needed to feel like I was contributing. I needed to make money. I've always been that way. So I just got this little part-time job down there at an insurance office for this cute little old lady, and I loved her so much. But again, I was not super happy doing it. And I was talking to my best friend, and she was a photographer. She had been a photographer, a family photographer for a long time. And she was just like, Tia, you model for me. You're so good in front of the camera. Just get behind the camera. I guarantee you if you pick up a camera, you'll love it. So I kind of liked that idea because I was trying to think like, okay, if we had to do this move and eventually I'm sure we'll have to do another military move, like I need a job that I can take with me anywhere. I need something where I'm not having to always quit a job and find a new job, work for a company and then leave the company and then have to find another company. I didn't want to go through that wheel my whole life. And so I was like, you know what, that's a great idea, Katura. I am going to go ahead and do that. So I just researched the camera. I wanted to be serious about it, so I bought a full frame right from the beginning. I bought a Canon 6D and a 2470 2.8 L series Canon lens, and just went for it. I wanted a good camera and a good lens, so I did it. And I did my first shoot. I shot my sister and her daughter, and it was like, it was just what I was meant to be doing. I loved it so much. Photography, it just filled that creative void in my life that I did not have. And it was amazing. I did their session and I loved it. I couldn't quit. And I just started doing sessions for like all of my family. And I did some sessions for some people I knew at work, because I still came back to Oklahoma pretty often. And so I would just shoot like people that I knew, and I shot models just to have like work going, and I was just posting it, and everybody was just loving the work. But I was just doing it part-time. I was so scared. Like in my mind back then, I was like, I will never do photography full-time because I can't leave a full-time day job, and I'm sure a lot of you feel like that, or at least I felt like that. Like, even though it wasn't the job that I loved, it was the job that paid the bills and it was safe. And not doing that, like if I went for photography full time, that would not feel safe to me. Like I grew up so poor that like I did not want to be poor in my adult life. So I just like, I felt like I couldn't do it. So I was just working this day job at this insurance company. Oops. I was working this day job at this insurance company and then shooting nights and weekends. And that's like how my life was going. And I was still just kind of, doing it part time, trying to, balance my schedule. I didn't have any kids at the time. And I knew that I was loving the shooting and not loving the job, the day job. But, I just kind of thought I'd always be right there, like having the day job, doing the evenings and weekends shooting and editing on my off time, and then I got a call one day this is why I say a lot on my social media pages, and I'm sure you'll hear it a lot here throughout my YouTube videos, just because it's just a part of me. But it was really a God thing. It was truly a God thing. I feel like God puts the right people in your life at the right time. And at that time, I just felt kind of lost. Like I was doing this new photography journey that I love, but I was working in this day job that I hated. I was in this toxic marriage, and it just felt all around like I was lost and I was unfulfilled and I was like stuck. I didn't know where I was going. So she called me up one day out of the blue and she was like, "Hey, I am doing this contract job, this oil and gas contract job in Tulsa, and they need a few more, contract people to come do it. And it's in Tulsa." And she lived in Oklahoma City, which is where I was from, which is where I am now. But I was in Texas at the time, and she was like, "It's in Tulsa, and I would love for you to come with me. So I don't have to drive to Tulsa by myself every week. And, I think it'll be fun. I think, we'll get to spend some time together, and, it's good money." And I wasn't really doing much down in Denton. I had the part-time insurance company job and then doing photography part-time. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And something was just telling me like to do it. I swear it was like God was just kind of leading me in that direction, because I instantly just felt this urge to say yes. And so I did, and I went to Oklahoma and signed up for this oil and gas job, and we drove to Tulsa on our first day, and we would spend all week in the hotel in Tulsa doing the work, and then weekends come home. That first week I was there, it was just like an instant peace came over like my entire body, my entire mind, my heart, everything. I just felt so at peace. And that was the first time I'd been away from Texas and away from that life and away from that toxic marriage. And I just instantly knew, like, I knew without a doubt, I needed to be back home. I needed to leave that marriage. I needed to leave that life where I felt lost, and I needed to come back home. I needed to be back with my family and friends, and I needed to be back where I felt comfortable, back at home where everybody was. And in Texas, I had nothing. And here was everything I had: my family, my nieces, my nephews, and everything. So that first week I was there, I just knew, God was like letting me know, hey, this is where you need to be. This is where you're happy. And as hard as it was a very peaceful, easy thing for me to drive back to Texas that first weekend, tell him that I wanted a divorce and that I was moving back to Oklahoma. And that next week I did. I moved back to Oklahoma. And, you would think that'd be a super scary thing, asking for a divorce and leaving the life you had built for so long and going back to essentially start over. And I was 30, by the way. I was 30 years old whenever I got divorced and moved back to Oklahoma. So I was truly, truly starting over. But even though it was super scary, I just felt like that was what I was supposed to be doing. And so I did it. So I finished that oil and gas job. And I'm so thankful that she asked me to do it, because if I had never left Texas, I never would have known how unhappy I was there until I got away from it. And just the peace I felt when I was back in Oklahoma, it's like just something I couldn't describe. So I just knew that I needed to be there. So as stressful as it was to move and start over at 30, I just knew that that was what I needed to do. And so I moved back home. I finished that oil and gas job, and I was like, what am I going to do now? And I didn't know. So that was the beginning of the rest of my life. And it was at 30. So part of this part one of this backstory is to tell you guys, for anybody who has been in this situation or is in this situation, it is never too late to start over. It is never too late to go after what you feel like will make you happy. And if you're unhappy, it is just, it's never too late for you to change things. And that's what I did. And that first change, not even having to do with photography specifically, but just that change, getting out of that life that was not meant for me and coming back home to start the rest of my life that was meant for me, that was the start of everything. So, and there's obviously more to the story in part 2 and part 3. I'm going to tell you the big change that, changed my life and my business, and then where I am now, which is everything that I built over the last decade. So stay tuned. If this did not bore you to death and I didn't ramble too much, I hope that you'll watch the next one because it gets better and better and better.